Hello and welcome to BCM241 Media Ethnographies. In this video, I'm going to talk to you about the media niche. The concept of the niche comes from ecology and ecological thinking, but it has been used in media and communication to think about the way we typically in the past at least, have segmented media formats and forms of media, such as television or radio. And the niche has been used to talk about how we program materials with specific targets in mind, such as gardening or reality TV or the arts. The concept of the niche has been used to argue that ecological models are appropriate for thinking about the way we understand the media industries, and particularly for understanding the way competition works in the media industries. However, as we know in the digital environment, we don't have the same constriction of resources that broadcast media, such as television and radio and print, have. So the concept of the niche when we're talking about digital media is dramatically different. What we do know about the media niche, however, is that just like in ecological thinking, we can think about the way that content creators operate within the niche. And we can talk about two different types of ways of operating. The first is the specialist. The specialist in the niche is very effective at exploiting particular resources, while generalists are better at navigating environmental change. So, for example, you might have a content creator who specializes in reviewing hardware, like cameras and graphics cards and things like that. And so they might become a specialist in talking about qualities of web cameras, for example. While you might get a generalist who is better at talking to a general audience about the kinds of things you might need to record a video like this at home. And so they might not know the specific details about the quality of the resolution or the handling of the color, but they might be better at talking to a broader audience about the kinds of things that they might need to get set up. So there's an example between the difference between specialists and generalists within a particular media niche, that is, PC hardware for home recording. Now, it's important to remember that these are not exclusive categories. Someone might be a generalist for the most part, but then create a series of videos that specializes in some way. Or you might have someone who is working in a specialist. They might be a specialist in a particular type of beauty product or fashion. And then they might change their content to reflect more generalist approaches. Now, what this means is that unlike broadcast media, it is much easier in digital media for the specialist and the generalist to cross over and overlap. Barry Trow writes about the importance of overlap in the work of the bioacoustic artist Bernie Krause. Krause proposed the term the acoustic niche hypothesis in 1974 to show how different species in tropical and subtropical areas made sounds identifiable in spectral bands that had both temporal as well as spatial conditions. So, for example, you might get a species of insect that makes noises to attract mates in the early morning at the lower part of a valley. And then a different species of insect or bird or whatever might make different sets of noises around noon at a different location in the valley. And then you might get a third species who starts creating sounds in the evening at a different location in the valley, right? So you've got species who are overlapping in this valley, in this one area, in this one ecology, but they're operating at different times and in different frequencies within the spectrum. And so they can share this space successfully. This is what we call mutualism, because the success of one species in this location contributes to the success of other species. Cy Taffel writes that ecosystems are comprised of assemblages of species which co-evolve, depending on others for their continued survival and proliferation. So to go back to the YouTube example, the success of reviewers of PC hardware on YouTube, for example, if you need to buy a new monitor or a new keyboard, or even a whole new computer, you might look at reviewers about PC parts, and the success of those people on the platform also contribute to the success of reviewers who talk about camera qualities, or teach courses on how to use your camera and get the best settings out of it on a PC. So this is the idea that the niche involves mutualistic specialists and generalists. This also means that the implicit idea of the niche as an oppositional relationship, i.e. competition, you might have heard of the term survival of the fittest, is not actually a suitable explanatory mechanism for the niche. Whether it's tropical forests or YouTube or Instagram or Patreon, you have assemblages of these species who work together for mutual benefits. Now, this includes the content creators, it includes the platforms, and it also includes the audiences, because audiences on digital media are active. Every click, every like, every subscription, every recommendation, and so on, is hugely important and part of the mutualistic relationship within the media niche. So, if you're trying to evaluate the health of the niche that you're trying to work in, or you're trying to understand how to create content for that niche, there are a couple of things that we can pay attention to, that we can draw from this ecological model. First, we should pay attention to what actions foster success in the niche. So this is where your ethnographic research comes in, and you can start to look at other content creators and determine whether they're specialists or generalists, and start to look at what times they upload, i.e. the most successful operators in the niche, when are they uploading? You might look at specific times of the day. Are they uploading in the morning, evening, and so on? Now, these conditions aren't static. They might change and will often change. So these are things that we can go back to constantly when you're creating content in the niche. What are the keywords in the titles and the descriptions? What is the current trend in thumbnails, composition, sizes, fonts, colors? How are people lighting their scenes, for example? We can also ask what actions are closing off success. And this has a lot to do with the platform. For example, YouTube changes its policies all the time. So you need to be constantly evaluating what kind of content or what kind of actions will close off success. Is there a particular topic? For example, you might have noticed people referring to a certain global illness without mentioning the name, right? Because the YouTube algorithm was picking up on that and pushing that lower down in the recommendations. Finally, you have to determine to what degree do you have agency. And agency is like a negotiation of control. How creative can you be? There are particular genres that emerge and evolve on YouTube. Are you going to participate in that genre? Are you going to follow the format of content in your niche? Or are you going to experiment? Maybe be creative, maybe be a bit different, not worry about aesthetics and so on. This is the difference between live streaming and recording, for example. So these are the questions to ask as you're investigating your media niche. What actions foster success? What actions close others off from success? And to what degree do humans have distinct agency? Remember those 3 questions as your investigation progresses and use them to help guide you create content for your media niche. The constructivist view, argues Thomas Lamar, reminds us that the role of the audience as a species actively shapes the niche through their agency, their empathy, and their parasocial relations. It's not just a gimmick, or it's not just a stereotype or a cliche to ask your audience to respond. You see this on YouTube all the time. It's not just about driving the algorithm. Successful content creators build communities. And the most successful ones will struggle to engage fully with their communities all the time. But this is how you build an audience. You engage. You have to find ways to attract people to your channel, but then you have to find ways to engage them with your content. It's not enough just to put content out there. We'll talk about content proliferation strategies in this subject further, but this is the important part. John Buderick and Deborah King wrote back in 2008 when they were describing the Courier Mail, which was a fortnightly Indigenous publication. It's now a website. But back then it was a physical publication, and they talked about it as a distinct media niche because it fulfilled a role in a particular community. It wasn't just pushing content out there. It was specifically speaking to a community, an active audience, and trying to reframe the dominant ideological constructions of mainstream media. This is why also certain fandoms don't encapsulate the media niche in its entirety. For example, on the one side, you have the YouTube channel Anna, that Star Wars girl. Now, you can see this public persona is framed around cosplaying and contemporary issues in culture, reviews about Star Wars, and other popular media. Right? In terms of fan kind of culture, it's quite broad. It's quite mainstream, in fact. Then on the other side, you have a much more niche channel. You have Space Doc, which is specifically about starships. Doesn't matter what the program is. It could be Star Wars, it could be Star Trek, it could be a video game like Halo. The niche here is starships. Now, hopefully you can see the difference there between those two types of videos. One is a more generalist, one is much more fan-based. There's not, I mean, it's got Star Wars in the title, but it's not really about the Star Wars niche. It's about much more than that. Whereas Space Doc is particularly about the niche content of talking about starships. All right. So, a working description of a media niche and we're kind of summing up to a kind of definition here. A media niche involves a digital environment. It caters to what the mainstream does not entirely service. It has unique technological and social conditions, and these include temporal and spatial dimensions. It features both generalists and specialists, and it is co-inhabited by content creators, media platforms, and audiences with specific sets of agencies. So the very last point I want to make is that niche content creators are part of what I call niche creator industries. That is that they're a smaller subset of what Cunningham and Craig call social media entertainment. And you can see that there are overlaps here, right? Social media entertainment influencers, the top Instagrammers, the top YouTubers, they're more about personalities and being celebrities. And then you have overlap with particular fan labor sites, like that Star Wars girl. And then you have overlapping again, but also carving out their own unique niches. And we'll talk about the specifics of further niches like gardening and aquascaping and beekeeping and things like that in the tutorials. But there you can see where niche content creators overlap into these areas, but can also distinguish themselves amongst the broader digital media ecology. The references will be in the notes accompanying this lecture. Thank you very much for watching. I will see you in the next video.